Hi, everyone, and hi to Larry. Folks, I am Dave Gash. I'm just the moderator for this session, just to make sure things roll along as smoothly as we can. Our speaker today is Larry Kunz. Larry is in North Carolina. So I forgot to ask, how's your weather today?
It's cool for this time of year, Dave, which is not a bad thing. It's in the mid 60s Fahrenheit, and it's kind of a windy day.
Yep. Well, actually, that's about the same here, unusually. I'm in Southern California, where it should be 75 and sunny, and it isn't. It's cool and windy. So I'm glad I'm inside today. Anyway, welcome to everyone. Come on in and park yourself. And Larry is going to talk today about taxonomy. And I'm being a word nerd. I'm kind of interested in this. I think it's fascinating how our taxonomies affect our processes in both positive and negative ways, and I'm sure Larry will talk about that. I will remind everybody this is view only, so I can't let you in to share your audio and video, but the chat box here is for everyone's use. Please feel free to type anything in there as you have comments and questions, or if you just want to talk amongst yourselves, that's okay too. Participants do that a lot, believe it or not, and they have complete conversations there. I'll try to keep an eye on that. If there's anything important, if you have questions, please feel free to type those in. I'll try to save them. Larry is going to try, I believe, to address questions as a group at the end. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Larry. Larry, you've got 45 minutes till about 3:15 your time. So everyone, please welcome Larry Kunz, and I'm going to bow out here. So see you in a little while. Larry, it's all yours.
Thank you, Dave. And let me just verify, you can see the cover slide?
Not yet.
Not yet. Do I need to reshare?
Very likely. You had them up earlier.
Oh, yeah. It stopped sharing.
There it is.
All right. How about now?
Rolling. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for checking. All right, and welcome everybody. It's good to be talking with you today. This seems like a really exciting conference. I guess this is the second set of breakout sessions, and I'm really excited about all the things that we're going to be doing together in the next 3 days. My name is Larry Kunz, and I'm located in Wake Forest, North Carolina, which is near Raleigh, and every day it seems to be nearer and nearer to Raleigh as both of those cities are growing, approaching each other. I work at a company called Extreme Networks. We are involved in networking technology. For many years, we've mostly sold hardware, switches and routers, and especially APs. Now we are also and primarily selling the software to create those networks and manage them, and especially in the cloud. My title here is Information Architect, and it's kind of cool. My background, most of my career is in the technical writing area, and that's where I started working at Extreme, and I got the title of Information Architect as the person who did the strategic thinking and tools decisions as well as tool support for the tech writing team. But for years and years, and maybe some of you are like this, I would go to conferences like this and meet up with other technical writers and say, well, we really understand about the importance of content. And wouldn't it be nice if the people in charge at our companies, the powers that be, also had that same awareness and understood how important content is for the whole organization and really is pivotal to the company's success? Wouldn't that be nice? In the last couple of years, we've brought in some executives who get that. They understand exactly what I just said, how content is critical across the organization through the product experience, through the buying experience, through the customer retention experience, as well, of course, as the support experience, be that technical documentation or the tech support knowledge base, those sorts of things. And so they get this, and they understand that you can't have a coordinated content strategy without a taxonomy, without consistent terminology, without consistent style. And they put me in charge of a big piece of making this happen, including developing and implementing the taxonomy. So I feel like the dog who finally caught the car after years of chasing it. And sometimes when things seem a little bit daunting, I say to myself, well, what do I do now that I've got this bumper in my mouth? But really, in my entire career, I've never had as much fun as I'm having now. It's a really terrific challenge. It's a really terrific opportunity. I'm working with some amazing people, and we're making some good stuff happen, and I want to tell you about that. But first, a little bit about what a taxonomy is. I understand that maybe not all of you are versed in this. I'll talk about why the taxonomy is part of that content strategy, that overall holistic approach to making content be part of your business success. I'll describe how I created the corporate taxonomy here at Extreme and how we're implementing it, and how we're going to get the most from the taxonomy in the future. We're not all the way there yet. We have a ways to go, but we have big plans. And finally, I'll share some tips to help you get started if you're looking to do the same thing. And I hope that you are. So what's a taxonomy? Well, I think the best definition, the simplest definition, is that taxonomy is for sorting and classifying things. So suppose you go to the grocery store with the intent of buying tomatoes. Well, do you want that? Or maybe that? Turns out the supermarket has them both. And in fact, you'll find one more than likely in a different place than the other. I don't think I've ever been to a supermarket where the canned tomatoes and the fresh tomatoes were right next to each other. The store could have grouped them that way. They could have said, well, all the tomatoes go together. But instead, they organized things in a way that made more sense to the grocer and to their customers. So it's not enough to say tomatoes. You have to apply a little bit extra. What kind of tomatoes? Similarly, if I go for carrots, do I want this? Well, I want this. I could also get a can of carrots like the can of tomatoes. And now I'm looking at 3 different parts of the store: fresh carrots, canned carrots, and frozen carrots. So again, it's not enough in the taxonomy to just say carrots. That's certainly important, but you need to have a second facet or a second node in the taxonomy that says what kind. And then finally, what about this? Most supermarkets carry it. And Accessibility 101, what I'm showing is a bottle or a container of Prestone antifreeze for your car. Where does that go? Well, I think your grocery store probably has a different taxonomy from mine now. Most of them store it with hardware or things like that. It's kind of a miscellaneous department. But again, they need to know where to put every piece of merchandise. And that's based on how their customers think. It's based on what will move the most. And so the taxonomy is important. That taxonomy promotes consistent terminology so that we can talk about different kinds of tomatoes or different kinds of carrots in the same way. We might settle on this set of terms, and so we're not going to call some other kind of carrot. We're going to use one of these terms to describe it. And the same with whatever your company produces in terms of products and services. You need to settle on a set of terms, and consistent terminology, as I said, is important to an overall content strategy. But taxonomy is much more than that. That's just part of it. And we'll see that in a few moments. But I'd like to pause now to call your attention to a poll question. The slide has the question and the responses. In your conference screen over in the right side next to the chat tab, there's a poll tab, and you'll see these questions, and you can select the one that applies to you. I just want to get a gauge of where my audience is. where each of you are in terms of understanding and working with taxonomy. So the question is, what's the status of taxonomy where you work? We're using a corporate taxonomy, or a few teams are using local taxonomies. Perhaps you're getting taxonomy off the ground, or maybe you came in here expecting a presentation on how to stuff an animal skin. What's taxonomy? Isn't it the same thing as taxidermy? It's not. So if you could just indicate your answer to the poll question, I'll leave it open for just a minute or two, and then Dave, you can help me by reading off the percentages, if you would, or the raw numbers, whichever makes sense.
I am in the polls tab, but it's polling me as a viewer, and I'm not seeing.
Oh, okay. You don't have a view results button?
I don't have a view results button.
Let me pop out of here then and view the results. I can do that. Okay, so a few of you have voted. Half of you are using a corporate taxonomy, now less than half. Thanks to somebody else for voting. We have 33%, or a few teams are using local taxonomies, and then smaller percentages of getting your taxonomy off the ground. And one brave, kind, thank you for your honesty, soul, responded with, what's a taxonomy? That is actually, you're a little bit ahead of the audience. When I polled the same question at the UX Writer event in February, some of you may have attended that. That's also one of Joe Walensky's conferences. At that time, about a third were using a corporate taxonomy, and a quarter were using local taxonomies, and about a quarter of the group had the bottom question, the bottom answer, what's a taxonomy? So it sounds like this group is a little bit farther ahead, and that's great. We can have some good conversations later on. So a taxonomy, as I said, can help you get your terminology straight, and that is an essential part of the content strategy, but it's certainly not all there is to a taxonomy, because a taxonomy can support or help you reach the goals of your business. And I've put up an example of what a taxonomy looks like in practice. Even if you have never seen a taxonomy before, well, actually you probably have, because here's an example of one from a retail website. And I specifically chose a clothing website because, or a clothing retailer, because they have so many different kinds of clothing and so many different ways to sort that clothing. And so Land's End and others like them, I think, often do it the same way. They sort often by gender. They will sort by size range. They will sort by category: outerwear, sweaters, t-shirts, pants, etc. As you see here, there's more to this than you see. I didn't make an exact screenshot. I just took a piece of their menu, but each of these was a decision in their taxonomy. We're going to classify our clothing by gender. I think they also have, they have men's, women's, and unisex. They have four different size ranges. Others might use numbers, but the Land's End taxonomy goes by the words. And then the categories, and lots and lots and lots of categories. And depending on who the real retailer is, they will have different categories. They may have different names for some of these things. But this is the outward manifestation, the result you see of a taxonomy. And how does it support Land's End's business goals? Well, one thing, it helps them keep track of their inventory. They know how much they have of all of these different categories of things. But the biggest reason, of course, is it helps their customers find what they want and be able to make use of the website as effectively as possible. So that's an example of a taxonomy. With a good taxonomy, you can direct your content to the right audience at the right time. So by tagging each piece of information, whether it's a topic, whether it's an image, whether it's a web form, you can learn about your audience and then adapt to the audience the particular pieces of content that they're going to find the most interesting. You probably know that Land's End and other retailers keep track of what you look at on the website so that they can present ads or special deals for that particular kind of item to you personally. You can make your content easy to find, and we just saw that with the facets or a faceted search on the retail website. You can promote consistent branding and terminology. We talked a little bit about terminology, but I didn't tell you my full background. I not only have a background in technical writing, but for several years, I was also in technical marketing. And so I understand the importance of the word branding to the corporate personality or the corporate brand is very important in how it interacts with its clientele. And you want that branding to be consistent. You want the branding to reflect your perception of how the world is. And so the way you classify and sort and tag each item in your content is going to reflect that. And of course, you're going to want to use consistent names. You're not going to want to call the same product by two similar but not identical names. That brings confusion. That undermines confidence sometimes in your customers if you have the same product but you're in the habit of referring to it with two different names or lumping it into two different categories. We do switches, we do APs, we do routers, we do all sorts of things like that. Well, what if we put switches under hardware one day and then we put them under some category called network gear or something the next day? Our branding would be suspect. Our customers would have trouble finding what they want to find. And finally, we would have a hard time managing our content. Taxonomy can help you manage your content. We're going to talk about governance in just a moment. So let's break each of these down. We started out, we had lots of people. There they are. Each one of them has their own expectations about what to call things, where to find things. So we can't customize to every person, especially when we don't know who that person is the first time they visit the website. But we can anticipate the terminology they're going to use, and then maybe if it's not the terminology we've selected, we can then guide them to the correct terminology with a faceted search, for example, like Land's End did. They call things by certain names because that's the terminology they've chosen. But lots of people with lots of expectations, and again, lots of expectations on where to find things. How I navigate a website is probably different from how you navigate a website because humans are interesting. Humans are unpredictable. We had lots of people, both customers and employees, and they were all using similar but different terminology and that sort of thing. They were producing lots of content in lots of formats, and this is just some of the stuff that comes from Extreme Networks and the formats. That guy down there on the bottom, his name is Isaac DeBreu. If you haven't seen Extreme Academy, by the way, he is, for my money, the best, most enjoyable person for explaining things like Wi-Fi technology and networking access points and things that you never imagined you might be able to understand, perhaps. But he's a joy to listen to. But his content, obviously, is, well, not obviously, but as you might have guessed, is video. The document on the right is a data sheet that we use for marketing. It's usually on the website in PDF, but it can also be printed. In the back there, the large one, Extreme Portal, that's our knowledge base, and where customers go to ask questions and download software and those sorts of things. We do a lot of HTML, a lot of PDF, lots of different formats. And each of these formats can be tagged with metadata to reflect your taxonomy. However, it's easier in some formats than in others. And so that's something to consider about it. to consider as you ramp up your taxonomy is what formats are we producing content in? What formats do we need to produce content in? And how can we make sure that each item is tagged appropriately in that format? Lots of different audiences, and our company has grown by acquisitions and mergers over the last decade or so. So that brings in new audiences. It brings in perhaps large enterprise customers for sure, but also smaller customers that might not be interested in all the ins and outs of computer networking. They just want to set up an AP and get it working in their coffee shop so that their customers are happy. So lots of different audience in lots of different countries. They have different names for things and so forth. And finally, not only do we have a lot of output formats, but we also have a ton of different tools that we produce the content in. And again, just like the output formats, some of the tools are better than others at reflecting metadata, which of course is how your taxonomy manifests itself. So this was our situation when it came time to build a taxonomy. So how do we sort all that out? And how do we manage it effectively? Well, I thought about the goals of the organization, and as you might expect, asterisk there, I had a lot of help with this step. Talk to anybody and they'll say, oh, I can tell you what our goals are. We want to increase revenue. We want to increase margins. We want to build our market share. And the way to do that is to accommodate many different types of content. We had a whole separate content marketing or digital marketing team revamping the corporate website at the same time that this taxonomy was going together. And they were happy to work with me, I'm pleased to say. Down the road, we want to deliver personalized content. Our sales model is moving quickly from simple purchase a thing, pay the cash, and there you are, to monthly subscriptions for software. There's a lot of personalization involved in that. There's a lot of important steps with the user experience on how that happens, how subscriptions get renewed, how you can change things. We wanted, of course, to ensure that all of our content was findable. Search engine optimization is what SEO is. And we also want to be able to manage and control all of that. And that's what I refer to as governance. For example, you can't just put a piece of content out on the website and rub your hands together and say, that's it, there now, I'm done. What happens 3 months from now, 6 months from now, when that content grows stale or is somehow obsolete because a new product line has come out? We need to know where that content is. We need to know when it needs to be reviewed for relevance, and we need to know who needs to review it. We also want to know the provenance of that content. Where did it come from? So this is part of the taxonomy as well, and we can also tag content with that. So I took all these goals, and the goals start big. We want to increase revenue. We want more market share. We want to make our customers happy, things like that, and went down from the abstract to the concrete. How do we do that? And this is some of the ways we do that. So when I knew what I wanted in my taxonomy at a big picture level, what were the main categories I wanted, I made a spreadsheet. And yeah, the tool was Excel. So if you're thinking that taxonomy is a big deal and it's going to be a huge investment, not necessarily. Now, if you have access to a taxonomy tool, and I'm going to mention Pool Party, I have no connection to Pool Party, but it's an excellent taxonomy tool. And if you have access to something like that, that's fantastic. But if you don't, you can make a spreadsheet. And I hope you can see the headings here, because it's kind of how the taxonomy organizes itself. There are some broad categories, and I'll show you those in a minute. And then the metadata value, or the facet, remember Land's End had the search facets: size, color, style. These are the facets. Content type was the first one. Description, what is this? What kind of artifact is this? Is it an internal or external? Well, it's external. Everybody wants to know that. Skip over to the examples of values, and I just have the first few here. It could be an analyst report. It could be an at-a-glance summary. It could be a blog post, and so forth. Of course, there's many more here. But this is, the keys here are the categories and the facets. And again, I have a slide very soon to show you, I think it's the next one, what those were, but also the example values, how this is used. Do I control the list of values, or do I allow content creators to put any old value in the field? Something to think about. It will depend on each field name or facet. Once I had that spreadsheet together, I shared it with lots of different content creators. The marketing teams, both corporate marketing and product marketing. We have the two sections. The user enablement or tech pubs team. They had actually been using metadata for a while because technical writers are special, smart people. So they definitely had a lot to contribute. The training teams like Isaac and his friends, they have a different slant on things. They look at things differently. So I needed to get their perspective and make sure that their content fit with the taxonomy I was proposing. We have a very active partner support organization. I mean business partners, resellers, companies that help the end customers set up their networks and act as a go-between between Extreme Network and the end customers. So that team has a lot of content and a lot of ways of sorting out the data. They had a much richer taxonomy, it turns out, than I was proposing for the corporation, and that's great. They get to use all of the fields and facets they want, but some of them they needed to bring in line with the new corporate taxonomy. Finally, I talked with the people in tech support. They produce a lot of content, knowledge base articles and things like that. And whenever I talked with someone, I would refine the taxonomy based on their suggestions, adding, renaming categories and facets, adding values to the lists. And when I did that, it helped me get the buy-in from these different groups. And one thing I do want to emphasize and leave you with is I had really good cooperation and really good buy-in from the other teams as I did this. And it was better than I expected. Not because I thought we'd all be different warring camps, but I thought there was really not much of an awareness of the importance of all the content creators to come together and collaborate. But when people heard about this, it was like they were thirsty and they said, this is great, I want more of this. How can I be part of it? So that's to encourage you as you set up a taxonomy at your company, that you may find it easier than you think to get other people to go along with you. Once the taxonomy had been fine-tuned and was pretty much baked, I made sure to get an executive sponsor. I mentioned we had brought in some execs who really understand content, and the person who is at the highest level and who really gets this stuff, her name is Carla. She agreed to be an executive sponsor. She was willing to say, this is the taxonomy. Hey, everybody, we have a taxonomy. Here it is. I made sure it got out on SharePoint where everyone in the company could see it. I attended team meetings of the other content creation teams, the training team, the partner enablement team, and so forth, and showed them the taxonomy and described what we're doing with it. And as I said, I worked with those teams as well, helping them figure out how to adapt their content and their tools and perhaps their own taxonomies to the new taxonomy. Is it perfect? No, because as I said, there's a lot of content in different formats. There's a lot of content produced with different tools. So there isn't a perfect correspondence between the tools and the taxonomy, but we do the best we can, and we find the things in the tools that can support the taxonomy, and we use them. Here are the facets in the taxonomy. As you see, there are 5 primary categories. How is this content used? What product or service does it support? What personalization can we apply? And I'll come back to this one in a moment. And then there's SEO, which is kind of a free form, any metadata that content creators want to put in that helps their content be findable, helps the search engines. And this could be synonyms, this could be special terms that are in use for a particular audience of theirs. And then finally on the right is the governance. This is the internal one. This is the one that says, for example, which ecosystem it came from, which part of the company it came from. What processes do we need to follow? Publish date and sunsetting. The sunsetting is the one I mentioned earlier. When do we need to look at this and say, is it still relevant? And then, of course, the ecosystem tells us who looks at it and who makes that decision. Personalization, I said I'd get back to. This one is the one with the most potential right now. It's kind of just getting started, but this is the one that can really work to get the right content before the right person at the right time. And so we have 4 facets. First of all, what stage of the buying process are they in? If you're in marketing, you might have heard of the customer journey or the sales funnel, and I'll stop with the jargon now. But are they somebody who's brand new to the company and they're just looking around and trying to understand our products? Are they a person about to make the buy decision? Are they a customer who's already up and running? We can customize content for each of those and several others as well. Locale, where are they located? Custom content for Asia Pacific or Europe or North America, or even our partner support teams really drill down with locale, the individual countries and sometimes even sub parts of countries if it's a large country. What is their level of mastery? Are they an expert? Are they that person at the coffee shop who just wants to get something up and running and not think about it? And then vertical, this is, I'm afraid it's a marketing jargon. It means what industry they're in. Are they in healthcare? Are they in government? Are they in education? One of our big ones, which is really cool, is sports stadiums. Most of the NFL stadiums, most of the Major League Baseball stadiums have extreme networks behind their Wi-Fi. So which vertical? And of course you can customize content to certain verticals. So that briefly is what the taxonomy looks like. Certainly you're welcome to use this as a model, but yours will be different. And where we are today, the taxonomy is available to everyone in the company. I continue to work with project teams to align their taxonomies and get their tools better suited. And we're converging on that governance structure. It's a big project, as anyone who's done content strategy knows. The governance structure is not something you can set up overnight. And we realize that it needs to be part of an overall, what we call design system center of excellence. That's the style guide. That's the artifacts that go into products so that we have the same widgets on all of the different product screens. That's the place where things are standardized. That's the place where decisions are made about design, both content and in product. And so the taxonomy falls under that as well. And so the governance structure is coming together, but we have the facets and the categories to make it work. What happens next? We'll build our design system center of excellence. We'll establish guidelines for updating the taxonomy because it has to be fluid. New products will come online. We're going to sell into new industry verticals, I hope. We'll think of things we didn't think before, maybe. We need to be able to collect metrics. For example, what are the search terms that people are using most often to find our stuff? And we want to make sure that our taxonomy and our terminology supports that. We want to be able to open up feedback channels from our customers and our partners. And of course, one way to do that is internal usability testing, which our market research team is doing right now. And so we'll need to adjust and update and fine tune as needed. The taxonomy is a living document, but the structure is intended to be very long lasting. I won't want to say permanent, but certainly endure for a long time. The long-term future, I'll just touch on this, and I'm running a little bit behind on time. Some of you might have heard of ontology. And very briefly, what I've been talking about so far is a hierarchical taxonomy, higher level categories with lower level categories under, like this. But on the right, ontologies actually establish relationships between things. So here's an example. We have a list of countries. I might have 3 facets in my taxonomy: countries, cities, and people. Well, there's relationships between those. Molière was born in Paris. So now we've crossed from the people category to the cities category and defined a relationship. And you can see how content has relationships with other content all the time. And so if you can set up an ontology, you can build these kind of relationships and really supercharge the way that you get content in front of the right people at the right time. So Molière was born in Paris, and guess what? Paris is the capital of France. And so now we've brought in the next node. We're not doing ontology yet, but I certainly anticipate that we will be, because, as I said, it's going to be a big boost to the goals of our business, what we're trying to get accomplished. So now what about you? Maybe you're just getting started. Maybe you hadn't thought much about taxonomy and what it could do for you until today. But now you're interested in getting going. So again, like I did, start with your organization's goals. Figure out what the organization wants to do, both in the broader sense and the specific sense. We want to make our web pages easier to find. We want to reach customers with the right content at the right time, whatever it is. Talk with a lot of people. That'll help you understand what the goals are. It'll also help you understand their worlds, the terminology they use, the ways that they categorize information in their minds. And you'll want to make sure that that's accommodated or actually reflected in your taxonomy. Talk with them while you're developing the taxonomy and after you roll it out. Make sure they're aware of it and what it has in it. If you start with a predefined taxonomy, there are some out there, you will have to plan to modify it. There is no one size fits all. There are no 2 instances where the same taxonomy applies. So you'll definitely want to change it, but you might find something that sort of fits your situation and give you a head start. Do consider governance. It's one thing to tag content and make sure it's findable and make sure it gets in front of the right people. Those are all wonderful things. But don't overlook governance, or the whole thing will kind of grind to a halt. And you'll still have that situation where the content on the website is stale and nobody knows where it came from, and those sorts of things. Get an executive sponsor who can stand behind the Design System Center of Excellence, or whatever you end up calling it, and give some heft to it, to give some authority to it. I had a colleague who set up a lot of this in the taxonomy, and then a new vice president came in and said, "Nah, we don't need this." Try and insulate yourself against that, inoculate yourself against that. Get that executive sponsorship, get the buy-in. That's another thing that happens when you talk with a lot of different people. And make sure there's a process in place for making updates, because updates will be needed. Just because circumstances change, and because you might want to broaden your taxonomy to include ontology, for example, and not just hierarchy. So definitely you need a process for making updates. And finally, remember to have fun, because this is really exciting. Think about what you're doing. You're making your content better. You're making your content more relevant, more alive, if you will. That's really cool. And it's definitely worth the effort. You'll find that you have more control over your content. Your content will go farther. Customers will like what they see, which, there's my marketing side again. You win the customer loyalty and the company makes more money and everybody's happy. Here's some resources to help you get started. Nielsen Norman is a great resource. You probably know that since you're at a UX conference. They specifically have a piece on taxonomy. That's a great place to get started. Heather Hedden, the accidental taxonomist, as the title implies. She was not trained as a taxonomist, but she came into it and turned out to really have talent for it, but also a great ability to explain it to folks like you and me. And then the standard for taxonomies really is the SCOS. And as you can see from the URL, if you look carefully, it's been around for almost 20 years. So it's a good thing to know about as you set up taxonomies. And so we've got about 5 minutes left. Dave, are there questions in the chat that we can?
There are. I'm here. That was a very nice presentation, Larry. Thank you very much. We have a couple of good questions. They're somewhat broad, so you should be able to talk on them a little bit. The first one is from Monica, and she is an information architect. And this is a question sort of near and dear to my heart because I'm a data guy. And so information architecture is part of what I know. She spent a year coaching her colleagues on what information architecture is and why it was needed. And her question to you is, how do you advocate for that in a modern design society? How do you advocate for information architecture and help push that structure requirement?
I think
Monica's question.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Monica. I think one way is to talk about how it helps the business, how it helps you reach your customers better, how it helps you target information to the customers. Perhaps cite examples that your colleagues probably are familiar with, since they almost certainly use retail websites or other websites where they experience this sort of thing for themselves. How did they know I was interested in such and such? How did they know? Wait a minute. How do they know how old I am? Sometimes it's creepy, but use positive examples and say, look what is possible by applying taxonomy, both hierarchy and relationships to your content.
That makes sense. And Kim also asked a very good question. Do you have any stories about how different groups have applied taxonomy? So like at the back end, after the advocating and the convincing and the use, how did groups actually apply that once they had it accessible and available?
I can think of one. I mentioned that there's a digital marketing team that's doing a revamp of the website, and they have been taking our data topics, speaking of data, Dave, excuse me, and using them to build product data sheets, including specifications, and building the web pages from them. So the web pages are no longer static. Here's a product, here's a picture, here's a description, but it's all feeding in from those data topics. And of course, the thing that makes it work, I shouldn't say of course, but it turns out the thing that makes it work is that all those topics are tagged with the taxonomy for the products, and the verticals and the experience level and all that good stuff. So you can build dynamic web pages like that. Very
nice. Kind of reminiscent of, I want to say not PDP. It's gotten away from me. Anyway, dynamic web pages. All right.
PHP.
So thanks to everyone, and thanks to Larry especially for a really good and interesting session. I quite enjoyed that one, I have to say. And thanks to Monica and Kim for the good questions. Wait, Emily just typed an A. Oh, she meant to say awesome presentation. Okay, well.
Thank you, Emily.
We
that's
couldn't
wonderful
quite
to hear.
extrapolate from the A. But anyway, thanks to everyone for attending. I believe we will have a break now, and a next session probably will begin. I don't have the schedule in front of me very shortly, though. So if you will go back to the sessions tab, everybody, you will find that that's where the session cards are, and you can click on any one that you would like. And I want to say thanks to everyone again for attending, and thanks to Larry for a very nice presentation. And we will see you later in the conference, everyone.
Bye, and thanks, everyone.
Thanks again. Bye, Larry.